Hi guys, I'm Matt Schlicht from ZapChains, and I'm here with James Skelley, attorney at Perkins Coie. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you explain IP and Bitcoin and legal to everybody watching. Super interesting topic. So welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm an intellectual property attorney. I do both procurement and transactions, which is a fancy way for saying I both get the IP, patents, copyrights, trademarks, and then implement it to achieve certain business objectives, be it to get licensing, to get an acquisition, to perform a merger. I've been doing that about 7 or 8 years. So before that, I was doing machine vision, and I was focused on just research technology side. But since then, I've been focusing more on the the legal, both at the technical IP aspect, but then also at the corporate sort of transactions level.
Got it. So once some of these people watching are probably going to be making a company at some point, and so once they raise a little bit of money, maybe they should go reach out to you.
You can. So I mean, patents, for example, they can operate in stages. If you're, when you're first starting a new business, like a Bitcoin business, and there's lots of interesting, cool technologies involved, it's not always clear which ones are going to take off and which ones are going to, sort of fall by the wayside. So what you can do is, for just a couple $1,000s, file a provisional application and sort of put your place in line at the patent office, saying, I want to, maybe we'll go forward with this, but maybe not. And so we'll go ahead and put our place there in the patent office and give ourselves the opportunity later, when you do have more money, maybe more funding comes in from venture, from angel, to go ahead and prosecute and file for the whole application, which can cost as much as $20,000. So it's sort of a way to hedge your bets by filing a couple opportunities through the provisionals, and then when you're ready, pick the best ones and then go forward with those.
Got it. And then if they don't hire you, is it true that you can actually mail yourself your idea, and then does that count as anything?
So what would be the proposition that you would mail yourself an idea, and the date and stamp of the idea
could prove that it was yours?
So most of the world for the past decade, for a long time, has operated a first-to-file system, where the first person to file has rights over anyone else who files later. The U.S. held out for a long time. We used to be a company where you could, the first person to invent, who came up with the idea first, they had priority. And it didn't really matter when you filed. And that's changed. With the change in law recently, we want to conform with the rest of the world, so we're also on a first-to-file system. So it's very important that if you decide that this is something you want to protect, this is something appropriate for protection, go forward, get that provisional filing, at least keep your options open so that later if you want to go forward, you can. That said, we may talk about this a bit later, in Bitcoin technologies, there are different technologies which lend themselves to patenting and some that don't. The quintessential example is like a trade secret. If you invent some fantastic new algorithm that operates in the back end of a server hidden deep in the recesses of your company, no one's ever going to see that. And so it may not be worth getting a patent. You may not even want people, because the patent will publish and become publicly available, right. You may not want people to know how your server works. So that's something you might want to just keep to yourself and not disclose. On the other hand, if you're creating a new Bitcoin wallet, which is operating on a mobile device, which is really cool and people really like it, well, your competitors, they're going to reverse engineer it, take it apart, and they can easily do that because it's going to be on every mobile device. So that's something that you probably would want to patent. So it's that kind of trade-off of where does it fit inside the big scheme of your business, and where does it fit technologically alongside the whole landscape.
Got it. So if someone watching needs to patent something, they should probably talk to you to figure out maybe if that even makes sense or not.
Right, and it does get easier with time. I mean, with clients, we usually take it slow and are very methodical the first time, but once you understand how the game is played, and it is a game, once you understand how it's played, it's very easy to start doing steps yourself. So preferring provisional, for example, the first time I do most of the work, but increasingly I'll delegate that to the client and let them, first it saves them money because I'm not the one writing it up.
You're like, you do this.
Well, but it makes more sense for them too. If they have the engineer who's skilled, the engineer, once he understands like this is what goes into provisional,
right.
Then they themselves, they're the best, they're the ones inventing. They're the ones in the
Absolutely.
best position to put it together, wrap it up, and then we'll just review it and file it.
Right, that makes sense. So back to Bitcoin, because that's what these guys are probably here for. How is it being an IP attorney in the Bitcoin space, and kind of how, have you worked with Bitcoin companies, and kind of what have you done with them, and what has your experience been in the Bitcoin space?
So my background is actually machine vision. I used to work in robotics, teaching robots to recognize emotion and facial expressions. And so I've been doing software for more than a decade. And I've been doing a lot of open source software too. And so Bitcoin, the protocol is open. And it's like a lot of different technologies that have an open foundation that doesn't prevent you from innovating on top of it, but you are going to be innovating around that open base. So a lot of Bitcoin products, a lot of Bitcoin software is open source. And so it's not necessarily just a Bitcoin problem, it's just a general software problem. But there is the recurring, issue of which, if you want to release your software open source, which license do you pick? How is it going to align with the rest of your business? If you're selling part of your products for profit commercially, are you going to sell other products under the GPL license or the MIT license? And which license do you pick so that it behooves you to get your commercial product on the market?
Right.
And in Bitcoin, I guess, it's sort of the normal open source problem, but to another level because you're already working in an environment that anticipates a lot of open source aspects, a lot of open aspects, alongside a lot of people trying to create businesses and create commercial products. So that's one factor that's unique to Bitcoin. Another factor, I suppose, would be that Bitcoin is a very unique intersection of different spaces. So there's the financial sector, there's the technology aspect, there's computers, the cryptography, e-commerce. And so I think a lot of Bitcoin people, they don't realize all the opportunities that presents. They kind of see themselves as, we do Bitcoin. But what that means really is you do e-commerce, you do cryptography, you do all applications, GUI side. There's all sorts of opportunities there. I think if you see yourself as not just a Bitcoin company, but a collection of different environments, then when you approach your IP, you can generate a lot more value that way. For example, if you file for a patent, filing for a patent on an improvement to the Bitcoin protocol, that has value, that has some value, but it's not as valuable as if you could enlarge the scope of that to cover all cryptocurrencies, or even better, all financial transactions involving a certain concept. And that will make you more attractive to potential acquirers. It'll make competitors more reluctant to get involved in your space, not just competitors in Bitcoin, but in any cryptocurrency. It'll also give your IP that more flexibility so that, who knows what the future holds. If you need to sell that IP someday, maybe a bank would be interested. A bank who's not even interested in Bitcoin right now may see that asset and be like, oh, well, that would help us too in what we do. So that's something to keep in mind.
That makes sense. So when someone approaches you in the Bitcoin space to help them, file for the IP, you're typically going to help them maybe not make it specific to Bitcoin, but make it specific to a wider range of things so that not only a Bitcoin company would potentially be interested in acquiring that.
That's right. And one thing I would encourage anyone, not just Bitcoin, people in the Bitcoin space, but anyone working with an attorney is, the attorney is there to help you. Be proactive, engage the attorney, tell them what you need, tell them your big business plan. This is all confidential. Tell them what the big goal is, because that will affect, for a good attorney, that's going to affect how they proceed with each legal tool. So with the patent, if the patent's going to be used to get more funding in the future, that's not quite the same. It can be, but it's not quite the same as a patent I'd prepare for someone who needs to sue someone to stop them from doing what they're doing right now. And if you keep the attorney involved, they should be able to adapt and conform to get you the result. Because in the end, that's what this is all about, right? You want to get the certain result, and they need to help you get to that point. So participating with them, being active, that's the way to go.
Do you think that attorneys in general are trying to stay away from Bitcoin and not take on any Bitcoin-related clients?
I don't know any attorneys who try to avoid clients. I think all attorneys love having clients, but I think I do think it's a challenging space for a lot of attorneys. So I'm fortunate in that I have a pretty strong tech background, I have a pretty strong legal background, I have a pretty strong, I have a lot of friends involved in startups and business. So between all that, I have a pretty big knowledge base that fits into Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, like I said earlier, it plays in all these different spaces. So you kind of need to be that Renaissance person to embrace it and jump in. And I think more attorneys are getting comfortable with that. It's taking them time. Some of them come up to speed. Some are strong in one area, maybe the tech area, but they're not as strong in some other aspects. Some are strong in the regulatory, but they're not as strong in the IP aspect. And so over time, I think they're getting more accustomed to it. Our firm is actually, we're taking kind of the lead on Bitcoin in the space in a lot of respects. We're very fortunate to have Lowell Ness and some other people at the firm who are experts in the area and have been doing not just Bitcoin but financial transactions for a while. So I think that kind of experience in the banking sector and other sectors, if it carries over, that's a great foundation for getting involved in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies generally.
Okay, so I have a friend who has a Bitcoin company, and the legalities of it aren't really defined. He's not doing anything bad. He's not doing money laundering or something like that. It's just
okay.
It's not.
It's a good start.
It's just not. there's this new concept of crypto equity.
Okay.
Where it's like Kickstarter, but people are purchasing these coins, and then in exchange they are technically owning a piece. But there's no legal documents that are going with this. And so he's been trying to get a lawyer for that, and he's actually had a lot of people turn him down. So I think I'm going to send him to you guys.
There's certainly people I know in our firm, Perkins Coie, who have expertise in that area, and they could at least answer the question, like, is this something that you can go forward with? Is this something that's kind of concerning? My focus is intellectual property on the technology side. You know, I do know that in many contexts, Bitcoin is treated as currency, like any other currency, and so a lot of the implications of that, you know, in terms of regulation apply. So just on base what you said, I wouldn't know what the answer is, but is this sort of, I mean, that does come up in Bitcoin, especially in any technology where you're on the edge pushing the envelope. I mean, you should be sensitive that what you're doing may be shut down someday.
Right.
There's a Supreme Court decision with Arrow as an example of a technology which they were, I mean, you can Google this if I'm online, but they were trying to sort of apply technology in a way to get around the law, and sometimes you have to be careful to honor the spirit of the law, even if you think you found a way to get around the letter of it.
Right.
In the long run, a lot of times, especially when there's market pressures to push it back, it's not a strategy that works out. That said, it's great to be creative. I mean, if you think you found a way or an approach, an equity approach to Bitcoin, I mean, that's something to entertain, to certainly you know, speak with an attorney, see if you can go forward with it.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool what he's doing. It's just not really defined in our legal system yet, but hopefully he doesn't get, you know, goes to jail or anything. But so maybe if he didn't hire you guys yet, are there any legal tools that he could be using?
Well, there are legal, I guess let me respond two ways to it. I mean, there are legal tools, generally speaking. There's some websites where just to incorporate and file documents, you can do that online with the online forms. You don't necessarily need to talk to an attorney to do that.
Is there a place that you would recommend for that, like a specific website?
There are a couple that they're escaping my name, the name right now. I could find out. If there's a link or something, I can tell you afterward. I have to go look them up.
I like Clerky. Clerky is pretty good.
Clerky is one I've heard of. Clerky is good. There's another one. Some associates from a firm started. I'm trying to remember the name, but it's a similar idea. There are a couple of websites. If you find Clerky, you'll find the others that will allow you to file the forms online.
Clerky is awesome because it basically makes it as easy to register or incorporate a company. Basically as easy it is to like register a domain name. Costs like, you know, more than that. But
right.
It's like for $500 you can get an entire corporation.
Right, and attorneys can do that for you too, and it just depends on your needs. I mean, sometimes that's the easiest thing, is just do it yourself, and then later when you have the need. Because honestly, when you're starting a startup, I mean, this is a bigger question, but there are so many things you need to focus on. Law is just kind of one small aspect. You can't devote too much time to this stuff. So in a certain sense, you just want to get the job done. If it breaks, you'll fix it later. You just don't want it to be a catastrophic failure.
Right.
As long as it's something you can repair later, that's fine. To get back to your other question about your friend, though, I mean, in some ways, it's a good sign. If you're pushing the edge of the envelope, if you're in a new market that's so new, it's not regulated yet, in some ways that's a good sign. That means that you're someplace there may be a lot of opportunity there for you. It's just your intuition is correct. At the same time, you have to be careful that even though there's opportunity, it's not going to get you in trouble, because it relates to some existing framework that's been regulated.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, someone's got to do it. I'm pretty proud of them that they're willing to take that risk to try to push kind of innovation forward.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it takes. So in the Bitcoin space specifically, have you run into any IP hurdles?
Occasionally, and they're not necessarily just the Bitcoin space. It's just technology in general, but particularly with open source. I mean, there'll be people who have great ideas technologically, but then when you come and it's more of a business decision. It's how do you release that? Some people I've talked to that have like a core component that they want everyone to adopt. And the question is, how do we do that? And then they have something else they want to sell on top of that for profit. And it's kind of tricky to pick the correct license, the open source license for the first one, and then to create the license terms of the latter one so that everything's working in harmony to create the kind of business machine that you want to have effect. And that's the sort of thing where I think it pays to have a good attorney. It pays to engage them and sit down and talk about the big picture plan so that they can take all those separate pieces together and build something that in the end gets the business where it needs to be. So that's one issue. at kind of a higher level, we were talking earlier about the intersection and generating IP that covers multiple domains.
Right.
So the Supreme Court has come out recently, well, it's been making comments on this in several cases for a while, Bilski and others, but the Alice decision was the most recent, where they're reiterating that you can't patent abstract ideas. And this affects the financial industries because sometimes, banks and hedge funds, they'll try to patent very, very general ideas like, hedging risk using a computer, which is just way too broad. Sometimes that's an issue in the Bitcoin space, but often most people here are so innovative, they're coming up with like hard, concrete technological solutions, and that rarely runs into trouble with. Occasionally we'll have to explain to the examiner why, but that's usually not as big an issue as someone who's going for a broad financial kind of inchoate.
Right.
So for example, with your friend who's doing the equity, trying to get coverage on just Bitcoin as equity, that alone would probably be very difficult. That's kind of an abstract concept. It's kind of a very high level domain, but I'm sure he's had to make modifications to the protocol or build structures on top of the protocol to have that happen,
right,
or make that possible. And those are certainly things you can pursue. So it's kind of distinguishing the patentable aspects from the things that are too general.
Right, so he may not be able to patent the concept of crypto equity, but if he's built technology that helps power that, then he could potentially patent that.
Right. And this is not a legal rule, but the way I usually think about it is the difference between how and what. The patent office would prefer don't try to patent what you do, but patent how you do it. If how you're doing it is the technology, that's what the attorney should focus on and put in the application.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think one other thing that could be super helpful to everybody watching is if, a lot of people probably haven't hired a lawyer or an attorney before, and they wouldn't necessarily know where to start with that. So if someone is starting a company or they think that they've created something that some sort of process or technology that they want to patent, what is the best way for them to approach you?
It depends. Form kind of follows function. The goal is to have somebody you can work with in the long term and that can do a good job and get you the results you need. In the IP sector with technology, I usually tell people to shop around. And then go ahead and challenge the attorney, both to see if there's someone you can work with, but also see are they up to speed in the space. So I do machine vision, and I have clients all the time who come and they won't hire me at first, but we'll do a technical interview where they'll challenge me with questions. And we'll go through recent research papers, they'll be sure I'm just up to speed, and then when they're comfortable, and they'll do this for 10 or 12 firms, and this is if they have the time to do it, but if they do, it usually gets the best results, because if we do decide to work together, they're usually very happy. We looked around, you're the one we want to go with, and that for long term, that's the best kind of relationship. So if you have the time, I would say go ahead and shop around. Check out different attorneys, talk to your friends too, because usually with one person finds someone, they can be kind of your guinea pig or litmus test. If they have a good relationship with the attorney and they think it's working out well, I talk to them and go forward with them. At the same time, you have to do what's best for you. Just because something worked for someone else, maybe that was a personal relationship, maybe their business is structured differently and they don't need the expertise you need. So I would take it with a grain of salt. If a friend's having a good experience, go ahead and explore the experience they're having with that attorney, but then be prepared that maybe there's some exception for why they're doing so well.
Right, that makes sense. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for kind of explaining this and going into more detail about IP and Bitcoin and open source. I hope that a lot of people watching are going to be creating technology with
I'm sure they will, yeah, they already are. Yeah.
And that when they do that now if they want to protect themselves, they understand how to do that. And Clerky is awesome, and so if you do need to start a company, that is a super easy way to do it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.